Welcome to Law Potato, hot legal topics with Idaho values.
Welcome to Law Potato, hot legal topics with Idaho values with Alan Harrison and Laura Wallis of Alan R. Harrison Law. Alan is an Idaho estate planning attorney focused on helping families plan for the future with clarity and confidence. And Laura is the firm's chief operating officer, bringing a systems-focused, family-centered perspective to the planning process. I'm Leanne Lyon, and today we're talking about what actually makes an estate plan effective in Idaho and why having the right plan in place matters for every family. Since this is our first episode, can you both share a little bit about your backgrounds and how your different experiences shape the way you think about estate planning for Idaho families?
Hi, this is Alan. I'm from Meridian, Idaho, and that's where I grew up. And after graduating law school, I went to Boise for a year and clerked for a judge. After that, I came over here to Idaho Falls, and I worked for the prosecutor's office for 3.5 years. I did all of the guardianships for the state in Bonneville County in child protection cases. And then I opened up my own firm in 2007 and did criminal defense, divorce, anything that came in the door. And I just didn't feel like I was really making a difference and really helping people long term. And so about 10 years ago, I went on this journey to really figure out how I could really help people. And that led me to focus exclusively on estate planning, probate, and guardianship. And I really like these areas because it gives families a chance to plan for the future, to set up what's best for their family, and then to mediate any conflicts that they might have and save litigation as a last resort. I'm not a litigator. I like to see people plan for the future and try and come together to resolve any conflicts. And that's what we've shaped our office around, is about collaboration. And that's why I brought on Laura. And so I'll let her introduce herself.
So I actually also come from a civil engineering background. And Alan went to law school and I finished up my professional license. So I am the parent of a special needs kid. And so my perspective really comes as a user on the other side of this system. And as an engineer, I found out that helping to run a law office was very similar to designing a pipe. It's all about systems. It's all about making sure you know what's coming in and what's going out. And so I have really... I've spent a lot of time, I think, bringing Alan perspective on what it feels like to be on the other side of the system and not just, sitting from the law side, but how about the user side? What does it look like to use these systems and how does it work? And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
It sounds like a really great partnership in that case. Well, I know many families assume that an estate plan is just a will. Can you explain what a complete estate plan really includes and why it's much broader than most people expect?
I'm gonna steal this one from you, Alan, and I'm gonna say this: lawyers have lots of answers, but the simple one, and he can give you the technical stuff. The simple answer is that a will is just one small part of an estate plan, and there's so much more involved in it. A will only kicks in after you're gone, but an estate plan should be from now until after you're gone. And so I'll let him talk about the details, but I think that's what people don't understand is a full estate plan is going to touch your financial accounts, your life insurance policies. It's going to touch your home and your family and things about special needs and what happens if you're still here and incapacitated. That's all part of an estate plan. So he can deal with the details.
Yeah, a will is just, like Laura said, just one piece of it. We have financial powers of attorney and medical power of attorneys and HIPAA releases that deal with if someone is disabled and unable to make medical or financial decisions, we need to know who has authority to make those decisions for them. A lot of people also like to get a trust and avoid probate, as well as make it clear who can step in to help them with their assets. And so a lot of times we'll do a trust in addition to a will. And anytime you do a trust, that really forces people to look at what are their assets, how are they titled, who are the beneficiary designations on all those accounts. And when we meet with families, we like to get a snap picture of what are their assets today, how are they titled, who are the beneficiaries, and then make a plan of how they want those to be distributed once they're gone and handled if they become disabled.
So, why does having an estate plan matter, even for families who feel like their situation is just simple, or maybe who don't consider themselves wealthy?
Yeah, and we get this question a lot, just because, especially when we're talking about trust for people. Some people ask, why do I need to do a trust if all I have is a house? Well, having a trust clearly sets out how you want your assets to be distributed. It also can allow for property to continue to be held after you're gone, such as if you have minor children or disabled children. A lot of times we're dealing with second marriages and stepchildren. And so your plan might be simple, but if you don't take those into account, then your wishes aren't carried out. Another thing is sometimes families have not had contact with a child in a long time and may want to disinherit them for various reasons, or leave them a smaller amount. And anything that is going to deviate from everything just going to your spouse and then the rest just going to your children, you really want to have an estate plan to make sure that it's clear how things are to be distributed.
So, what tends to happen when somebody passes away or becomes incapacitated without a clear plan in place? And why does that uncertainty create stress for families left behind?
Oh, I think that the big answer there is that when they don't have a plan, all of the unknowns get dumped on someone at the exact same time the stress is being dumped on them. And I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily make my best decisions when I'm already stressed. And so when you see something happen to a family and there isn't a clear plan in place, then they're trying to figure it out with high emotions. And I have found, at least, that when someone passes, then you're dealing with all of the emotions of the person and your relationship and all of the other things that are happening at the same time. You're trying to decide who gets the forks in the drawer. It's not a good combination. And so watching those decisions be made ahead of time, it cuts down on the fighting. It also cuts down on the uncertainty, and it cuts down on the doubt that the people who are coming behind you feel, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? I very frequently said, never let the belongings of the dead ruin the relationships of the living. And when you don't have a good estate plan, assumptions become what everyone falls back on. And, they don't always happen to be the same. Parents, siblings, spouses, they may all have some different idea, especially if you have a family that is blended. You've got, second marriages, stepkids. It gets complicated fast. And so much of it could have just been handled if everything was written down. And sometimes what I think is worse is when they've told them this is what it's going to be, but that doesn't match what happens when it's written down. And then everyone just feels very, very betrayed, very unsure, and it just gets complicated very fast.
From your perspective, what separates a plan that looks fine on paper from one that actually works when real life happens?
Well, I'm going to say that no one has a crystal ball. And so when we do simple little plans and we think everything's going to be great, but we don't consider things that aren't problems right now, that's when I see plans that just don't hold, or they just make things more complicated. For example, if you might know you have a special needs kid, but someone might become disabled later. And if you don't have planning for that in your estate plan, then when you find out about it later, it may be too late or may make things really complicated later. We kind of are referring to disability planning here, but most people don't know that if someone inherits over a certain amount of money, they can lose their estate benefits, which means they may lose the access to medical care that they need to survive, which was probably never part of the plan. But if it wasn't done correctly, that may be what happens anyway. So, Alan, I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, and just speaking to that point, all of our estate plans have provisions in them that specifically we try and identify people who are special needs. I've reviewed wills or trusts from that have been done already and brought to our office, and either they didn't mention that they had a special needs child, or the attorney didn't know what to do with it, one or the other, but they left to that special needs child. The attorney had left money directly to that special needs child, which if in Idaho, if they inherit over $2,000, that can disqualify them from state benefits. And it just wasn't addressed in their estate plan. And so we helped them redo their plan and get that in place. There's been other situations where, as Laura mentioned, that someone does become disabled later. And I've had calls before saying, your trust says that if someone's disabled, then the money goes into a supplemental needs trust so they don't lose their benefits. And I said, yep, that's how it goes. And so we were able to preserve that from them getting disqualified from any state benefits.
These are excellent reasons to work with a specialist and not a generalist. Am I right?
Definitely.
Yeah. And I guess just getting back to what I just mentioned, our office, we do estate planning for everyone, and we can handle whatever situations come. But our niche is handling those with special needs children. And as I just had mentioned, if the attorney isn't aware of creating a supplemental needs trust for someone who would inherit money, then that can cause difficulties. The other issue that we're always talking about is some grandparents. I dealt with one just today, as a matter of fact. A grandparent is leaving a certain amount of money to each grandchild. And so they've created separate accounts for each grandchild. And the parents weren't sure, but they thought that those accounts were in their grandchild's names. Well, if you have a special needs child and you have that account in that name, that could affect their ability to get benefits now. And clearly when that grandparent's gone, and all of a sudden they get this money, that's going to affect it. And so we talked about how to switch that so that the grandparents in control of that money and can use it for the benefit of the special needs child. But once the special needs child or once the grandparent is gone, then that money can go into that supplemental needs trust, and it doesn't affect their benefits. And that's just one small example. I also do probates, and in those I've dealt with many situations where you have a special needs child and the parent either did not do any planning or had done poor planning and didn't put the proper provisions in their estate plan to ensure that that money was protected and they didn't lose their government benefits.
Well, how do things like family dynamics, caregiving responsibilities, or the possibility of future incapacity factor into building a plan that truly fits a family needs?
Yeah, with family dynamics, the discussion I always have with people when they're trying to choose who to be the trustee or the personal representative, who to be the guardian of minor children or disabled children, I guess maybe not necessarily with respect to the guardians, but with respect to who should be the trustee, we're really looking at who can get along with everyone, who has that relationship that they'll be able to gather the assets together, help determine values and not get lost in bickering over different values. Just gather them together, figure out what the assets are, and then be able to manage the different dynamics. And I'm reminded of a case where there was multiple children and there was difficult dynamics in that. And so as a result, the parents chose 3 of the children to kind of help. That were 3 of the most, they had a relationship with everyone. And so they were able to just kind of work through all the difficult family dynamics that they had in order to gather the assets and distribute them.
So something that many people don't know about Alan is that he comes from a large family. His wife comes from a large family, and they have a large family. In fact, he has 10 kids. And they all like each other and they all get along. And it's amazing to watch. That is not the family we all have. And so when we first started working together, I think I was surprised by how, with as much law experience as he has and as much time as he had in the prosecutor's office, that he still thinks everyone gets along as much as they do. And so I have had to remind him that not all families get along as well as his family does. And that is sad for the rest of us because his family is wonderful to see. But no, you're not perfect, but you all like each other, which is a great starting point. And so, I mean, I think it's important for some people to know that you don't have to pick a family member to do this. And sometimes they don't have a family member that can do this. And it is helpful, I think, for most people to just know that there are other options. There are professionals to do this role, but it's also family friends are a possibility. And if you look at the different options, I think we narrow ourselves by trying to find the perfect family member that's going to work. And it doesn't always happen. So, I know a lot of people who pick outside of the family, whether it's professional or just a friend that is able and willing to do this for them. But you don't have to have a blissful family to have a good estate plan. I guess that I think that is important to know, because not all of us like everyone in our family. Now, my family's pretty cool, but it's still it was still a consideration when we put our estate plan together, who was going to be the best to get everyone on the same page and work together.
Well, as we wrap up this very first episode, without naming names, can you share a story that illustrates how thoughtful planning made things easier for a family, or how the absence of planning created challenges that could have been avoided?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, I do probates, and I've dealt with several probate situations where I've had children come in and say, "This is what my mom wanted to have happen." And I say, "Well, is there a will? And does it clearly state this is what you want to have happen?" He said, "No, there's no will, but everyone understands this is what's going to happen." And I said, "Well, how many children there are?" And we were 45 minutes into the discussion before they said, "Well, Grandma wanted these things to go to the grandchildren." And I said, "Well, where are these grandchildren from?" "Oh, our sister died." And so it's that sister was entitled to a certain percentage of that. And because she died, her percentage goes to her children. And so, we were quite a ways into the discussion before I learned about this other child. And then they were all, it just wasn't what mom wanted, but that's what the law was. And so you just have to work with everyone to see whether that's going to get carried out or not. And I've had that on several cases. One other one that I'll just mention briefly is just we had someone die. They had no children. And so we've been having to locate distant cousins all over the United States. And we were able to locate 14 of the 15. And the last one, we're having to do an air search to try and find them. If there had been a simple estate plan, just saying, "Hey, I don't have any children, this is who gets my money," it would have saved a lot of just a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of difficulty for the person representative also.
I think another thing that's important to know about estate planning is we had a client who, when we started going through all their trust, the documents that they needed for their trust, what we found was that they had property that wasn't deeded the way they thought it was. And so since they were still alive, they were able to clean it up and get what needed to be done, which is a lot simpler when they are still here than after the fact. And so part of estate planning, I think, is being really clear on what you do have and how it's held so that you can put everything together the way you want. And I just think that most people don't put value in that because they don't even know it's a thing, but it's so much easier to fix when they're still alive. So yeah, those are the clients that when we catch those, it's just, I'm not sure they care, but I'm like, woohoo, glad we did it. Glad we took care of it. Somebody's going to, would have really not enjoyed that process later. So it's always nice to get it done for them.
So one of the situations where having an estate plan was very good was we had someone that came in, expressed their wishes, and unbeknownst, just unexpectedly, within the month, they passed away. Uh-huh. And as a result of that, the family had come together, and the family was trying to get mom to tell them what they wanted to do. They hadn't had an opportunity to do that. There was farmland, there was ranch land, there was funds. And because mom had set out exactly what she wanted to do, and she had picked one of her sons to actually manage it, we were able to read the document all together. This was one of those situations where no one had learned what was going to happen. And so we all met and we read, and there were people that didn't like it, but they all respected what mom's wishes were. And it went forward. Not everyone got equal because there just wasn't any way to do it equal unless they sold everything. And no one wanted to do that because this had been land for generations in the family. And so it was such a good experience to just have clarity with what mom wanted, and it was carried out.
Well, thank you both. And that is it for today's episode of Law Potato, hot legal topics with Idaho values. If you'd like to learn more about estate planning, guardianships, or planning for the future in Idaho, you can find Alan Harrison and Laura Wallis at aharrisonlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe, share, and leave a review so more Idaho families can find clear, thoughtful guidance when planning for what's ahead. Thank you, Alan and Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.